Welcome to the True Crime Family channel. Today, Westart or murder story in San Diego, California. July 2012, the city was set to celebrate Independence Day, but rage struck the patriotic town when police discovered the lifeless body of a decorated Navy veteran in his own home. The veteran's murder would unravel a web of deceit and passion that shocked the community. San Diego, California is a proud military town where veterans are highly respected. James Jim Carter was a highly respected Navy SEAL who served his country for over 20 years. During his military career, Jim was part of numerous high-stakes missions. One of his most significant contributions was during a covert operation in Afghanistan, where his team successfully rescued hostages from a terrorist group. This mission earned him several medals and commendations, solidifying his reputation as a hero after retiring from the Navy. Jim used his leadership skills to start a private security company, hiring many of his fellow veterans he believed in giving back to those who had served alongside him. Jim Carter was a man who had all but duty before anything else. At 45, he had built a successful security business in San Diego. A natural transition from his days as a Navy officer, his life seemed to be the picture-perfect American dream, an accomplished career, a beautiful home, and a loving family. He was married to Lisa, a 38-year-old devoted homemaker, and together they had 2 teenage children, Sarah, a bright and headstrong 16-year-old, and Michaela, a curious and energetic 14-year-old. The Carters lived in an idyllic suburban neighborhood, a place where the lawns were always manicured, and the neighbors exchanged friendly waves as they passed by from the outside. Their lives seemed perfect. Their home was everything they had worked for, a spacious house with a well-kept garden, a place where they had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and countless family milestones. But as Jim's security business thrived, it demanded more of his time and attention. Late nights at the office, business trips, and the constant pressure of managing his growing company slowly began to erode the time he spent with his family. Although Jim always mad, in an effort to better there for Sarah and Michael's important events, school plays, soccer games, or just a family dinner, his absence during the small everyday moments started to take a toll. Lisa, on the other hand, had dedicated herself to creating a warm and loving home for her family. She was a caring mother, always attentive to her children's needs, and a supportive wife who understood the demands of Jim's work. Yet as the years went by, she found herself feeling increasingly lonely. The long hours Jim spent at work left her with too much time to think about the distance that had crept into their marriage. She missed the days when they were younger, when they would spend hours talking about their dreams and plans for the future. Now their conversations were mostly about logistics, who would pick up the kids from school, when the bills were due, and what needed fixing around the house. One fateful day, Lisa attended a charity event in San Diego, an annual gala hosted by a local organization that supported veterans. She had always been active in the community, and attending such events was a way for her to feel connected, to fill the void left by Jim's absence. As she mingled with the other guests, Lisa couldn't help but feel out of place as she smiled and made polite conversation, but her heart wasn't in it. And then she met Rob Johnson. Rob was a successful real estate agent, 40 years old, with a reputation for being charming and persuasive. He had the kind of charisma that drew people in, and from the moment he laid eyes on Lisa, she was captivated. She was beautiful, with a grace and warmth that radiated even a room full of strangers. They were introduced by a mutual friend, and what started as a simple exchange of pleasantries quickly turned into a deep and engaging conversation. Rob was immediately struck by Lisa's kindness, and she was drawn to his easygoing nature and quick wit. As they talked, they discovered they had much in common. Rob had also gone through a tough time recently. His marriage hadn't ended in a painful divorce, leaving him with a sense of emptiness that his successful career couldn't fill. They talked about their children, their hopes, and their regrets. For Lisa, it was the first time in a long while that she felt truly heard, and the connection between them was undeniable. As the evening progressed, they found themselves gravitating toward each other, sharing stories and laughs that felt natural and effortless. There was something about Rob that made Lisa feel alive again, something she hadn't felt in years. It was as if the Ines that had been growing inside her was suddenly eased by his presence. When the event ended, they exchanged phone numbers, under the guise of discussing charity work, but both knew there was more to it than that. Lisa told herself it was just a harmless friendship, a distraction from the lone lines. But as the days turned into weeks, their conversations became more frequent and more personal. They began meeting for coffee, then lunches, and eventually their friendship crossed a line that neither of them could ignore. Lisa felt torn between her loyalty to Jim and the exhilarating new feelings that Rob had awakened in hers. She had never intended to fall for another man, but the more time she spent with Rob, the more she felt that she was finally being seen and appreciated, in a way that Jim no longer did. Rob too found himself falling deeper for Lisa, unable to resist the connection they shared. The once clear boundaries of her life began to blur, and Lisa found herself caught in a dangerous dance between duty and desire. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with Jim about his long hours, Lisa found herself at Rob's office. They shared a bottle of wine, and their emotion got the better of them. What started as a comforting hug turned into a passionate kiss, leading to a night of infidelity. This was the beginning of their filled with stolen moments and whispered promises. Lisa felt torn between her family and her feelings for Rob. She justified her actions by convincing herself that Jim's absence drove her into Rob's arms. Meanwhile, Rob, intoxicated by his love for Lisa, was willing to do anything to keep their relationship alive, even if it meant eliminating the competition. On March 2, 2012, Jim Carter returned home earlier than expected, hoping to surprise his family with a special dinner. As she entered the house, he noticed an unfamiliar car parked discreetly down the street. Jim's military instincts kicked in, and he approached the house quietly. Inside, he heard muffled voices and laughter coming from the living room. Curiosity turned into suspicion as Jim slowly made his way towards the sound, peering through a light crack in the door. He saw Lisa and Robin, intimate embrace. The sight of his wife with another man was like a punch to the gut. He flung the door open, startling them both. Lisa, "At the hell is going on?" Jim's voice was a mix of anger and hurt. Lisa, caught off guard, stammered, telling her husband that it wasn't what it looked like. Rob stood up, trying to compose himself, but Jim was shaving none of it. He advanced towards Rob, his face red with fury. Jim simply growled at Rob, telling him he had only 5 seconds to leave the house before he involved the police. Rob grabbed his coat and left hastily, leaving Jim and Lisa alone. Jim turned to his wife, his expression softening slightly. "Lisa, why, what's been happening to us?" Lisa, tears streaming down her face, admitted to feeling neglected and lonely. She told Jim that she loved him so much, and she began to apologize for letting her intrusive thoughts get the best of her. Jim, though devastated, realized that despite his anger, he still loved his wife and wanted to save their marriage. He told her they can work through this, the anger still evident in his voice, but this time it was calm and firm. His only condition was that she call Rob right there and now and end it, and promise to not be seen anywhere close to him, even by mistake. "If you want to save this marriage, you need to call him and end it." Lisa was surprised this was the only condition. And she realized how lucky she was that she had a husband who still wanted her despite her foolishness. Lisa nodded, wiping her tears. She picked up her phone and with trembling hands called Rob. She did it immediately, telling Rob that this whole affair was nothing but a big mistake, and she has decided to choose her family over him. Rob's voice on the other end was filled with disbelief and anger. He began to toil at Lisa, telling her she can't do that to him. Realizing he shouldn't be yelling, he began pleading, and his voice became softer. He began to beg Lisa, reminding her of all the sweet moments they shared. Jim, who was listening to this conversation, couldn't help but cry because he was sharing some details that were so painful. This made Lisa even more resolute, and she yelled at Rob their ugly affair once and for all. Rob, furious and unable to accept the end of his relationship with Lisa, became obsessed. His love for Lisa had turned into a dangerous obsession. On the night of March 5, 2012, Rob made a fateful decision driven by jealousy and a twisted sense of possession. He planned to eliminate Jim. Rob knew Jim's schedule and waited until he was sure Jim would be alone. Wearing gloves and a dark hoodie, he broke into the Carter residence through a basement window. which he had secretly unlocked. During a previous visit, he moved silently through the house, armed with a silenced pistol he had obtained illegally. Jim, working late in his home office, heard a faint noise but brushed it off, thinking it was just the house settling. Rob approached from behind, his heart pounding in his chest. Without a word, he aimed the gun, but before he shot, Jim, being the experienced Navy veteran, he felt the bloodlust and quickly turned to grab the gun, but he missed and only scratched. Rob seized the opportunity and shot Jim twice in the chest. Jim slumped over his desk dead before he could react further. Rob quickly set to work staging the scene to look like a professional, hit her and sacked the offices, scattering papers and valuables to give the appearance of a targeted burglary. He wiped down surfaces to remove any traces of his presence and left the way he came in, locking the basement window behind him. Rob's meticulous planning made the crime look like a professional hit rather than a random burglary, hoping to divert suspicion away from himself. The next morning, Lisa found Jim's lifeless body and called 911, her screams echoing through the quiet neighborhood. The San Diego Police Department quickly arrived and began their investigation. Forensics noted the signs of a struggle in the ransacked office, but were puzzled by the professional execution. Detectives arrived at the Carter residence the morning after Jim's body was discovered. Lisa, still in shock, was brought to the station for questioning. She appeared devastated. Here he is, red and swollen from crying. Initially, Lisa denied any knowledge of who might want to harm Jim, emphasizing his reputation as a well-liked and respected man. She claimed that Jim had no enemies and that their family life was relatively normal. However, inconsistencies in Lisa's statements soon surfaced when asked about Jim's behavior in the days leading up to his death. Lisa hesitated and gave conflicting accounts. She mentioned that Jim seemed distracted, but also insisted that nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Despite her initial reluctance, Lisa eventually admitted to having an affair with Rob Johnson. She explained that she had ended the affair a few days before Jim's murder, and that Rob had reacted poorly to the breakup. Although she did not initially disclose her suspicion that Rob might be responsible for Jim's death, her tone and body language indicated she was withholding crucial information. Rob Johnson was brought in for questioning by the detectives from the start. Rob appeared visibly nervous, his hands shaking and his voice unsteady. He provided a shaky alibi, claiming he was at home alone on the night of March 5th watching TV. When detectives pressed for more details, Rob's story began to fall apart. He initially stated he hadn't seen Lisa for weeks, but later admitted to seeing her just days before the murder, predicting his earlier statement. Rob also mentioned details about the Carter residences, such as the layout of Jim's home office, which he should not have known unless he had been inside or recently. Investigators further discrepancies in Rob's story. He claimed to have no contact with Lisa after the breakup, but phone records showed multiple calls and text messages exchanged between them during the period in question. Additionally, colleagues and acquaintances interviewed by detectives mentioned Rob's obsessive behavior towards Lisa and his volatile temper, further casting doubt on his innocence. These inconsistencies, combined with Rob's nervous demeanor and shaky alibi, led investigators to strongly suspect his involvement in Jim Carter's murder. Forensics experts worked tirelessly to gather evidence from the crime scene inside Jim Carter's home office. They found crucial pieces of evidence that would link Rob to the murder. First, they discovered a partial fingerprint on the edge of Jim's desk. The fingerprint didn't belong to any of the family members, raising immediate suspicion. The forensic team carefully lifted the print and ran it through the national database. The result was a match: Rob Johnson. Next, they found traces of DNA under Jim's fingernails. It appeared Jim had struggled with his attacker before he was killed. The DNA was sent to the lab for analysis. When the results came back, they confirmed that the DNA belonged to Rob. This evidence was vital, as it placed Rob at the scene during the time of the murder. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera. The camera, positioned to capture the street outside the Carter home, recorded a shadowy figure entering the house on the murder. Upon closer examination, They identified the figure as Rob. The timestamp on the footage coincided perfectly with the estimated time of Jim's death. Armed with this compelling evidence, detectives moved quickly on March 25, 2012. They arrested Rob Johnson at his home. The news of his arrest spread rapidly, shocking the community. People couldn't believe that someone like Rob, a well-known real estate agent, could commit such a heinous crime. The story made headlines, with newspapers and TV stations highlighting the betrayal of a veteran who had served his country with honor. Jim Carter was remembered as a hero both for his military service and for his dedication to his family and community. The betrayal and murder by his wife's lover painted a tragic picture of how love and obsession could lead to such devastating consequences. Rob was charged with first-degree murder, and the community rallied around the Carter family, offering support and condolences. The case drew significant media attention, not just because of the crime itself, but also because it involved a respected veteran. The trial of Rob Johnson began on June 15, 2012. The courtroom was packed with community members eager to see justice served for Jim Carter, a respected Navy veteran. The prosecutors aimed to paint Rob as a jealous lover who would stop at nothing to keep his relationship with Lisa. The prosecutors began by highlighting Jim's honorable service to his country. They detailed his years of dedication in the Navy, showcasing medals and commendations she had received. This moved the jury and audience, invoking deep respect for Jim and emphasizing the tragedy of his loss. Lisa Carter took the stand, her eyes filled with tears. She confessed to her affair with Rob, explaining how it started to feeling neglected by Jim's long work hours. She described her guilt and regret, stating she never imagined it would lead to such a tragedy. Lisa recounted the night of the murder in detail. She explained how she had ended things with Rob, hoping to save her marriage. Her voice shook as she described the fear and shock when she learned Jim had been killed. She admitted she had initially hid the affair from the detectives, but later realized Rob might be responsible. Forensic experts presented the evidence they had meticulously gathered. They explained how they found Rob's partial fingerprint on Jim's desk and his DNA under Jim's fingernails, indicating they detailed how key surveillance footages showed Rob entering the Carter home on the night of the murder. The evidence was clear and damning, linking Rob directly to the crime scenes. Several character witnesses took the stand to speak about Jim Carter. They described him as a dedicated and honorable man who loved his country and his family. They talked about his bravery in the Navy and how it transitioned to civilian life by starting a private security company to help other veterans. These testimonies painted a picture of Jim as a hero, making the loss even more poignant and Rob's actions even more villainous. The prosecutors argued that Rob was a jealous lover driven by obsession and desperation. They pointed out the inconsistencies in Rob's alibi and his nervous demeanor during questioning. They emphasized the forensic evidence and surveillance footage, leaving no doubt about Rob's guilt. The trial was immediately charged. The community's respect for veterans was a recurring theme, and the loss of Jim Carter resonated deeply with everyone present. The testimonies and evidence presented a heartbreaking story of love, betrayal, and murder. The prosecution's case was strong, and the emotional weight of the testimonies and evidence left a lasting impact on the jury. On August 10, 2012, the jury found Rob Johnson guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence. The verdict was read. Rob showed no emotion, but the impact on the community was profound. The judge's sentenced raw life in prison without the possibility of parole. The community felt a sense of justice, but the pain of losing Jim Carter, a beloved veteran, lingered. Lisa Carter was left to deal with the fallout of her actions. So overwhelmed with guilt and regrets, he sought therapy to help her cope. She knew she had to be strong for her children, Sarah and Michael, who were also deeply affected by their father's death. Lisa worked hard to rebuild her life. She focused on being there for her children, attending their school events and making sure they knew they were loved. The community, recognizing her efforts to make amends, offered their support. Neighbors and friends provided meals, helped with chores, and offered a listening ear. The community came together to honor Jim Carter's memory. A memorial service was held to celebrate his life and military service. The service was attended by family, friends, fellow veterans, and many community members who respected and admired Jim. During the memorial, people shared stories of Jim's brave area and dedication. They spoke of his time in the Navy, where he saved lives and showed true heroism. His colleagues from the security company he founded spoke about his leadership and the opportunities he provided for other veterans. The service was emotional, with many tears shed and heartfelt tributes given. A flag was presented to Lisa and their children, a symbol of Jim's service and sacrifice. The community pledged to keep his memory alive and to support the Carter family as they moved forward. As we delve deeper into the twisted web of this harrowing tale, one can't help but ponder the true cost of Lisa's fleeting desire for affection. Was Rob's descent into madness purely fueled by his love for Lisa, or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? Could Jim have somehow anticipated this tragic end given his military instincts, or did his trust in his wife blind him to the danger? What if Lisa had chosen to stay loyal? Could Jim still be alive today? It's easy to speculate, but the reality is far more sober. Jim Carter, a decorated Navy veteran, lost this life because of a deadly mix of betrayal and obsession, and now Rob faces life behind bars while Lisa is left to pick up the shattered pieces of her once perfect life. So what do you think? Should Lisa bear some of the blame for this tragedy? Was her role in this fatal love trial just her sort of loneliness sordid? She unknowingly set the wheels of disaster in motion. We're eager to hear your thoughts on this case. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights into true crime stories where the lines between love, obsession, and tragedy of 10 blur beyond recognition. We have many more stories where the pursuit of desire becomes the catalyst for devastating consequences. Be sure to check them out.